Councillor Bell, Councillor Pierce, all those in favor? Anyone with any pecuniary interest, please state them now. Seeing none. Delegations, we have two. The first one is Dave and Sherry for the air show. When you get to the podium, if you could just give your names and your addresses, please.
Hi, Sherry Kerr. My official address, 99 Race Street, Paris, Ontario.
I'm Dave Rohr, 384 Devonshire Terrace, Ancaster, Ontario.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for inviting us, having us here today to talk about the Community Charity Air Show. We obviously want to discuss our 2019 results and have an opportunity to talk about what we're planning for the 2020 Air Show.
This year, if you look at the revenues and expenses, and we have to do that ourselves, okay, thank you. You'll see that we had revenues of $119,847. You'll see expenses were $88,220. Expenses this year were higher for a number of reasons. One being performers. We had a bigger show and we had more performers at a higher price, as well as we had increases in logistics, primarily fencing costs and private security, as well as OPP costs rose. Other than that, most other expenses were in line. And with regards to revenue, our revenues were down in terms of sponsorship, which we need to continue to work at. And our dinner net was a little lower. Other than that, donation bins were up, and parking was about the same, although I believe parking is an issue because we had the largest attendance ever, I believe, at the show. And I think that we probably lost some parking revenues in that there's no gate at this show. It's a $20 per car charge. And some of the cars parked in areas where we didn't have people to collect. So we're looking at tightening that up in the coming year. Go ahead.
So compared to our 2018 show, and the 2019 show brought in $31,627. As our past agreements with the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum and the Rotary Club of Brantford, those revenues are shared equally between the two charities. Obviously, the Community Charity Air Show is not only a partnership between the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum and the Rotary Club of Brantford, but as well the City of Brantford and the County of Brant, and we're very appreciative of all the support we get both from the city and the county. Dave did talk to some of our challenges this year, our rising costs and logistics. Our policing and security went up again this year in terms of cost, and our volunteer support is always an issue. So our continued goal is to bring Brantford Brant one of the best air shows in Canada. Certainly, if you go to the Toronto Air Show or other air shows throughout the country, many of our performers will say Brantford's one of the favorite shows to come to, and we're not making that up. We can give you some reliable sources on that. But as well, to continue making this show by donation, it gives our community the opportunity to come out. Many families, our older folks come out, families come out. It's a great show day. It's not an exclusive event. It is really a family event, and one of our goals is to continue making it by donation with just our parking costs. So I'll let Dave talk more about that.
I'd just like to add that in 2017, when we came aboard with the Rotary and with City of Brantford and County of Brant to save the show, this show is a very unique show in Canada. First of all, it's the only show that there's no fee to attend. And it's the only show that's a one-day show and a midweek day, and it's before Labor Day, and that's to capture some of the acts that come into Toronto for Labor Day at a lower cost. The Snowbirds, we don't even have to ask the Snowbirds to come to this show. They plan it every year because they want to be here, as does the demo CF-18. But what you have in this show that you have nowhere else in Canada is you have the Lancaster. We don't fly in any other show. We only fly in this show. You have our vintage warbirds, you have heritage flights. We brought in the B-29 and a Lancaster flying together 2 years ago in 2018. We did the Lancaster and the demo CF-18, NORAD demo CF-18. You won't see that in Toronto. You won't see that in Abbotsford or any other show in Canada, but right here in the county of Brant and the city of Brantford. So it's a very special and unique show, as well as it's a family event. So we certainly appreciate your support. We're looking forward to your continued support and a little bit more help with some of the direct costs we have. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sherry or take any questions.
So just to reiterate some of the supports that we do get from the county, in previous years we've had a grant of $7,500, which has helped towards the social media or media expenses and our policing expenses. Brant County Fire comes out every year and supports the show. The ambulance, Brant County Ambulance, County Works Department helps us with the barriers along the road closures, etc. The OPP, they bring in their command center and some extra staff. We do have support from the roads for the road closures, county staff liaison. This year, I think it's, people keep going on maternity leaves on me. It's hard to keep up with who our liaison is, but we do appreciate that support as well, and the Tourism, Economic and Development Department. So moving forward this year, our request to the county is obviously the continued in-kind supports are very important to the show. If we didn't have those in-kind supports, though, having to pay for fire, ambulance, policing services, we do pay for some of the policing services, but I know we don't pay the full cost. So we do need to have that continued in-kind support, and we have applied to the county grant this year. We're asking for $10,000 in the support through that grant to help us with the rising costs that we saw in 2019. So we're happy to take any questions. This year's air show, it's a little later because the Labor Day weekend is later this year. So the show, the Tuesday night, September 1st, will be the dinner at the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum, which is our fundraising dinner, and the second will be the show, which is the Wednesday before the Labor Day weekend.
Are there any questions for Sherry and Dave? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again.
Sherry, you might as well stay up there.
I'm just going to stay here.
If you want to find Ben, is he here?
No, my co-presenter has not shown up yet. I may have accidentally told him 6:30 because originally I don't know why I thought it was 6:30. So I'm not trying to exclude him. Hopefully he won't abandon me altogether.
Are you all right to go
I
on?
can go ahead,
All right,
sure.
all right.
I'm happy to do this presentation. Bye, Dave. Bye, Sally. So I'm here, some of the many roles I have in our community. I'm the Executive Director at Participation Sports Services, and I am the chair of our Brantford Brant Ontario Health Team. And tonight we just want to talk about how we're moving forward towards an Ontario Health Team. I'm going to flip papers and do this. So the ministry is making many changes to the healthcare system. One of the first things they did was consolidate a number of our provincial health agencies and specialized programs into a single agency, which is now called Ontario Health, which will oversee the entire healthcare system. Our local health integration networks were consolidated, cancer care, Petroleum of Life, all of those larger Ontario organizations have all been consolidated into Ontario Health. Ontario Health Teams are organizations that we're starting to put together that are below Ontario Health, and it's a new way of organizing and delivering services within our local community. So multiple local healthcare providers will work together as a coordinated team. Brantford Brant has a unique situation in which we're pretty much a standalone community in terms of the services we provide and our boundaries and our physicians. So throughout the local health care delivery, many of the local organizations are just working together for what's a Brantford Brant Ontario Health Team. There's Hamilton Health Teams with much larger population base, Guelph Ontario Health Teams, but Brantford Brant, because of its uniqueness and the way in which our referrals for physicians, et cetera, go, are able to have our own, or right now are working on our own Ontario Health Team. So there are a number of providers already working together, including hospitals, doctors, home care providers. Your Ontario Health team, the essence of putting this team together is to have one group of healthcare providers that know your health history. We're aware of the healthcare services in your area. We're going to be able to navigate the system 24/7, ensure that referrals go to the right place, receive and share healthcare records, such as test results, etc., and provide digital options. I can say the digital options are one of the biggest barriers we have right now to healthcare. My organization isn't able to talk to the hospital about, if our clients go to the hospital, there's no way to really find that out unless we get a phone call, or we don't have a digital solution to be able to talk to each other amongst all the healthcare organizations. So that is one of the biggest pieces that we're working on, is that every healthcare provider can read the same record, see the information that's pertinent to them, so we can move people in and out of the hospital or from one organization to another organization, depending on what those needs are. So the current state, I don't know if you can see that. The current state is we have primary care, our doctors, we have acute care, the hospital, we have mental health and addiction services, long-term care providers, home care and community care, and we're all doing our own thing out there, supporting one person. And the Ontario Health team is to bring all of that together under one sort of roof so that we can all talk to each other and work for that patient together towards the patient, not the patient having to go out and find all these services and figure out what's right for them. So the core members of our Ontario Health team right now, and these members make up of the executive leadership team. That's the Adult Recreation Therapy Centre, the Alzheimer's Society of Brant, Haldimand, Norfolk, Hamilton, and Halton, the Brant Community Healthcare System, the Canadian Mental Health Association, the Aboriginal Healthcare Centre is, they're actually not on the executive leadership team, but they're a very close collaborator with us. The Grand River Community Health Centre, the John Noble Home is bolded again, they're a close collaborator. They are not a key partner as of yet. Participation Support Services, St. Joe's Life Care Centre, St. Leonard's Community Centre, Woodview Mental Health, and the Primary Care Family Health Team, again, is a co-collaborator. The Brant Paramedic Services, the Health Unit, and the City of Brantford so far are supporting the work that we're doing within that executive leadership team. Yeah, sorry. So population health looks at all the health status and health inequalities within the population, and some of the things that we're working on is what are all those various pieces of health that make up somebody's total health status. And in terms of Brantford Brant, we've currently prioritized mental health, addictions, dementia, and homelessness. So that's our first year priorities. Those are the groups that we're concentrating on within our first state. Because municipalities provide public health services, the paramedic services, all the human services, housing, social assistance, etc., those are all very big components of why we have a homeless population, our mental health addictions. So trying to align those things into our strategy, and that includes the community health hub, the physician recruitment plans, community safety and well-being plans. So our process, in May, we submitted a self-assessment to the Ministry of Health. We identified our key priorities: mental health addictions, dementia, and homelessness. And we were categorized as an in-development Ontario Health team. In January, we just recently submitted a progress report, and that report just gave the Ministry of Health an idea of all the work we've done since May to continue to become a team, a healthcare team together. And then we're hoping we will be invited to submit our full application in March 2020, and it will really look at the focused work we're doing with each target population, and as well planning our home community care and our digital health. After we've submitted that application, then there will be a site visit, and at the end of the site visits, we're hoping obviously to be designated Ontario Health Team. I can't tell you exactly what that means, but that designation will certainly put us that much forward in terms of what we can do together as a community. So our request to the county, and we've made the similar request to the city of Brantford, is that the council provide a letter in support of our full application for the formation of the Brantford Brant Ontario Health Team. And as I said, that submission date is targeted for March 2020. We do request that staff support be provided to help us with some of those integrated services, health and social services, particularly as it relates to our mental health, addictions, and homelessness strategies, and any other future healthcare strategies that we're planning. And the more support we have from our co-collaborators, the better our health team and the stronger our health team will be for everybody in our community. So that's that presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, answer any questions that you might have.
Does anyone have any? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Sherry. Sherry, what percentage of the total of health professionals in the Brant area does this health team cover? Is it 100%?
Well, it would be, in terms of agencies, the transfer payment agencies through the current Ministry of Health, it is probably 85% of them. Obviously, physicians is a big part, and how we get our physicians involved. The family health team has been involved right from the start. We do have a physician network that we've started, and each of there's FITs and FOs and all the different acronyms for all the family, for all the doctors and their networks. And they've come together and they've started to work through a process so that they can also become a co-sign-off on our Ontario Health Team.
Councillor Bell?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, thank you. That's what I noticed, Sherry, that the family health, primary care family health team was there, which represents, I think, 6 family doctors, but there must be, I'm going to guess, in the Brant area, 30.
I believe on our list, so the ministry provided us with sort of an outlay of their data, and there's 13 sort of primary healthcare networks that would refer, that our population would be referred through. And so the rest, those other ones we're working with to come together and and work with us so that it's all the physicians working together.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the presenter? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple questions for you to Sherry. But first question I want to ask is, does the Ontario Health Team have any support staff, anybody employed to answer the phones and lock the door when it's 4 o'clock? Or?
At the moment, it's all voluntary, so I'm chairing it through my role as Executive Director at Participation Support Services. My office manager takes all the minutes and distributes information. The Brant Community Healthcare System has Ben, who was unfortunately wasn't able to make it tonight, or may show up in 10 minutes and I'll look bad. Because I gave him the wrong time. So from the Brant Community Healthcare System, Ben is working with us and he's taken the sort of management lead. So I chair the executive leads and he chairs the operations piece. So we have a mental health and addictions working team, all staff from the organizations sharing their time to do it. So we don't have any paid employees as an Ontario Health Team.
I realize this is all new and it'll evolve over time, so we'll see. And then second question, you've listed health team executive leadership. And I'm not sure what their role is. Is it to make policy for the Ontario Health Team, like to pick those priorities that you've designated? Will they be getting dollars into the community? And it's up to this group to decide how it's allocated. What's their role?
Yeah.
I'm not. And are the other ones? Do they have that sort of governance model? I don't even know what the governance model is.
Well, we are working on the governance model as well. So the executive leadership team is the executive directors from those organizations that were listed. We came together in the first place to say, okay, this is what the direction is. What do we need to do together? So we selected our priorities. we've developed the specific work groups around mental health and addictions, homelessness, dementia, the digital health. So we've got those work groups that report back to us on the work that they're doing so that we can get ready. Basically, the executive leadership team is working towards the full application, which includes very specific questions about what can we do around digital health. There is a governance piece, so each of those organizations, we've had 2 sessions with governors. We're having another session in February, and we'll be outlining what the governance will look like for the Ontario Health Team. The ministry's thought is that every Ontario Health Team will have not only clinical accountability, but fiscal accountability. Right now, we don't exactly know what that looks like, but it appears that at some point, the Ontario Health Team will hold the bucket of money, and whatever governance we've created through working through this process will be responsible for all the clinical outcomes and the fiscal accountability for that team.
Okay, so more to come.
Yes.
And then the last question I have, Mr. Mayor, through you to Sherry. You have the city of Brantford on there as a supporting, and any thoughts on the county of Brant in there as supporting?
Yeah, absolutely. The city got involved very early not because of not inviting the county or inviting them and not inviting. It was just a matter of our community collaborative. So the originating sort of group was called a community collaborative, which has been, we've had that committee for a number of years, and the city always had representatives there through the housing. So technically it's Brantford, Brant County because of the housing staff that was sitting there. We made it to City Council in November, hence we were able to put them on the list, and now we're just here looking for the same kind of support. The housing group, which is basically representative of both county and city, are supporting us in some of our planning for sure.
Okay, thank you, Sherry.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my question was similar. When you mention county staff support on coordinating and integrating health and social services as it pertains to mental health, addictions, homelessness strategies, our social services department is a joint service, as you just mentioned, through the city and the county. And mental health and addictions is being addressed in our community safety and well-being plan. And I'm not sure, there's members, I think, that are on your group that are also on our planning group. So there's some liaison between the 2 groups, hopefully. But as far as staff support for those particular items, our staff are mainly city staff. So we do have one person that does work with social services in the county, one staff. So maybe she might want to
join us, yeah.
get involved, but I guess we'll have to determine that.
How it works, yeah.
Yeah.
The social determinants of health, we'll look at all of those things in housing. We know, social housing development in Brant County obviously is not tied to the city. The social housing or affordable housing is certainly a crisis that's causing some of our other issues. So that would be another area where we might look for at least that liaison to understand what's happening in affordable housing in the county.
And my last question is the submission in March. When do you think we would hear if we were successful?
If they ask us to actually submit in March, which is what we understand will happen, the other health teams that did their full submissions in October, they were all announced by the end of November, so we would expect 6 to 8 weeks, and we would know whether or not we'd move forward as an Ontario Health Team.
Oh, that's good news. We don't have to wait. Thank you.
Hopefully, yeah.
Are there any other questions for Sherry? Seeing none, thank you, Sherry.
Thank you very much for allowing me for both presentations.
And if you see Ben in the parking lot, give him our best.
Yeah, sorry, Ben.
Thank you. Okay, council, how do you want to deal with the delegations? Number A, the air show, Councilor Fair, Councilor Wheat?
Move the air show to budget and support the request from the Brant.
Okay, let's do the airport first. So Mark's going to second that. Yeah, any other conversation? Calling vote, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then Councillor Weed is also doing the Ontario Health Team, looking at secondary. Councillor Pierce, any conversation? Councillor Ferrier?
Just wanted to clarify to you and through you, Mr. Mayor. This is for the letter and also for staff to meet with them to see how we may support.
That's right.
One thing I would suggest potentially is if we can't have direct staff support just for whatever reason, that technically speaking, paramedic services are county staff and they could report at that committee if need be, but we'll leave that to staff's able hands to figure out, but it could be an option to still get some of that feedback back on a regular basis.
Okay. Yep. So if you need that kind of help, Sherry, let us know at a later date. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Number 5, adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wheat, that Brant County Council minutes of December 17th, 2019 be approved as corrected.
Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Consent items, there's none to be approved. Consent items to be received.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wheat, that the following consent items be received as information. I have 23 items on the list.
There's 13, and then there's 9 in your folder. Councillor Miller?
Mr. Mayor, I would like 7B2 pulled, please.
7B2.
Yes.
Yep. Any others pulled? Councillor Gatward?
I would like 7B7, 7B9, and 10.
7, 9, and 10. Okay. Any others? Seeing none, let's call the vote on everything that hasn't been pulled out. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. We're going to go back then. Councillor Miller, number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This response from Health Canada regarding cannabis production and residential complaints had a lot of good information in it. But there's a few things I just want to point out. They do talk about the license versus registration, and for those that aren't aware, licenses, those big ones like Emblem, where we don't have a problem. It's the smaller ones, the registration, where they grow it for medical purposes. That's where you see the odor. And I didn't realize this, but I guess that's allowed to go on, this registration, because of a court decision. That's listed on page 42. But if you go to page 44 of our package, and at the very top paragraph, it says, the last line in that top paragraph, such restrictions on odor and other requirements that apply to license holders under the Cannabis Act are not required under Part 14 of the regulations. So any marijuana, any cannabis that's grown under registration, they don't have to abide by any odor controls. Now, if you go to page 44, second paragraph, first line, for the same reasons, there's no regulatory requirement for Health Canada to notify municipal authorities of an applicant's registration. Okay, so anybody can set up shop under this registration and start growing cannabis. They don't have to let us know. But then they go on to say, under the very next paragraph on page 44, Health Canada encourages all provinces, territories, and municipalities to use the tools at their disposal to ensure that individuals meet all standards and bylaws, including local bylaws about zoning, noise, and odor. Okay, so they say that, but at the same time, they don't have to let municipalities know about these registrations, growers, nor do they have to abide by any odor controls. So that's a little frustrating. So there's some, it's a little bit backwards. So what I'd like to do, Mr. Mayor, is make a motion that, like the other consent items, we receive it, but that we respond to this letter, pointing out the inconsistencies of the current setup, and thank them for their letter, point out the inconsistencies, and then encourage them to do what they are doing, which is laid out in page 43. They are looking at, enforcement and all that stuff. So as I've since found out, it's a fluid situation. There's a lot of pressure on them, not just from us or Novrook or Leamington, or there's places out in Alberta. There's a lot of pressure on them. We had Phil McColeman write them a letter and all that. So I think now we need to kind of get in their face on this issue. So I'm going to make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we receive their correspondence, and that we respond to the correspondence, get staff to respond. I would suggest by law Greg Bergeron, because he knows about as much as anyone on staff does. Just point out the inconsistencies and ask them to continue to do it, try and strengthen these laws a little bit. Looking for a seconder.
A seconder. Councillor Pierce. Just before we call the vote, when I was at Roma last week, I was speaking to the mayor of Leamington, who's a very clever man, and they do have to, on the application forms, there is small print on the bottom of all the applications, and it says that they have to obey by municipal bylaws, whatever that means. And what they did in Leamington is they put the people that were growing for themselves, and you can grow for 3 other people, and depending on what the doctor decides you need for the number of grams per day, those 4 grows can be as big as a grow op. So they put a bylaw in Leamington that those secondary grows have to be done in commercial space. So you're not near houses, and you're not near schools, and you're not near churches, and you're not near all the things that become a problem with a store or something else. So that's what they did in Leamington. So if you want to grow personally or for other people, just find an office or find space in an industrial park, and you pass over a whole lot of things that would disqualify you. So with that being said, we have a seconder. Councillor Pierce.
I'd just like to speak to it if I could. Thank you, Councillor Miller, for pulling that out, because when I read through that thing, sure, there's a lot of information in it, there's a lot of decent information in it, but really, they're doing nothing. There's a lot of words there, a lot of stuff, but in essence, they're pushing it off. And, this isn't the first letter we've written to them about this. And really, when it starts off, Dear Mayor Bailey, I'm writing in response to your correspondence. I'm thinking, okay, finally, we're going to get something done here. When I was at the bottom, it's like, they've done nothing. So I think this is great to send it back to them with a lot of inconsistencies in there and say, what are you going to do? So I fully support this motion.
Okay. And the sad part of that is Mr. Bradley and myself and Councillor Coleman, we met with Ernie Hardiman in his office, and he sort of said, there is nothing. Right to our faces. He said, good luck, try not to get hurt. Everything's sort of federally, the rules are federal. I mean, there's no provincial stuff right now. So they aren't trying to hide behind anything there. And then I spoke to Mr. Hardiman again last weekend in Toronto, and he said the same thing. It's just, just try to do the best you can. Try to soften it with bylaws and see what happens. But with that being said, they're not trying to hide behind anything. I don't believe there's anything there to tell us. So with that being said, we have a seconder. Any other discussion? Councillor Bell?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I too am glad that David brought this up. I find this response a little cryptic, but I do think there's an opening in it as far as I can see. If I read the same second paragraph on page 44 that David mentioned, it says the registered individuals are required to comply with all relevant municipal laws, including local bylaws about zoning, noise and odour. Can we not write the bylaw that we want that actually deals with the problem? And taking your point earlier, Mr. Mayor, that you can isolate these growers to an area of the county that we want them isolated to. So I think I would go a little bit further than David did, and I would suggest that we ask our staff to look at preparing a bylaw that addresses the problems that we've seen and would obviate them for the future.
Would you like to break it into two motions, though? We'll do it with the letter first.
Well,
Councillor
let's do the simple one first, and then I'll leave the second one to
So
Councillor
Councillor Miller and Councillor Pierce, any other discussion? Are we clear what we're voting on? All those in favor? Okay, opposed? None. Councillor Bell?
Yeah, so following on from that discussion, Mr. Mayor, I would like to propose a motion that we request staff to bring forward a bylaw that addresses the problems that we've seen over the last numbers of years with this kind of cannabis growing operation, and that will, if properly applied and enforced, will obviate the problems that we've seen.
Seeking a seconder, Councillor Ferrier. Anyone want to speak to that? Any comments? Clear what we're voting on? All those in favor? Opposed and carried? Thank you. Now we're going back to number 7. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is from the Minister of Energy and Northern Development and Mines. And the third paragraph of the letter says it is anticipated the OMB, or the OEB, Ontario Energy Board, will begin a process for collecting information on potential new natural gas projects in early 2020, and that will run for 90 days. We had a request previously at council from a business in Scotland, just outside of Scotland, and I think we wrote a letter, but it didn't go anywhere. Or maybe it was for the first phase. So I'm wondering if, I don't know if staff got involved in the first ask from the Scotland area. There was a petition. Do you recall that, or was this last term of council? I know Councillor Miller and Coleman and I, and probably Councillor Chambers all recall, and Councillor Pierce.
Councillor Miller is going to speak to it.
Just really quickly, yeah, Frank Borgoff. Yeah, but
Yes.
that was an application, but that he did on behalf of himself and the neighbors, and they were at the end of the day they weren't successful. I think the program was oversubscribed.
They were successful?
They were not successful. Yeah.
No, and that's why I'm suggesting that if they would like to try again, and I don't know if the county helped them or not, but I wanted to point that out. 7B10, Mr.
Are you finished with 7?
Yeah.
You want staff to do anything for you, or?
Well, if they did the last time, if they assisted the residents and businesses in Scotland to extend the natural gas, I would hope they would do it again.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to what Councillor Gatward, actually, I had that one as separate as well. 1, 2, 3. The fourth paragraph down, it says, for further information, we encourage municipal officials to work with their local natural gas service provider if they are interested in participating in the OEB's process. I am interested in working with our local natural gas provider. Do we need a motion to that effect or direction?
Mr. Bradley?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think a direction to staff would be appreciated, then we can follow up on it.
If Councillor Gatward, did you want to make that one?
Councillor Gatward?
I would also like to say that I've heard that Glen Morris doesn't have gas, and there's a number of people I've heard of that would like gas. Some of them have propane furnaces and different types of heating because gas is not available. So there may be interest there too, but I'll move that we request staff to contact the ministry to advise that the County of Brant is interested in working on a project for extending natural gas in the County of Brant.
Councillor Coleman?
I'll second that, and I want to speak to Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Coleman. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Chambers?
Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you probably know that there was a roundtable on this very topic that SCORE participated in, and I was one of the participants. The province has allocated a certain amount of money toward what they're calling Phase 2, and I suspect and I think everybody would realize that the money will not last long because it has been announced and the projects are being probably forward as we speak. So I think the resolution would entail some sort of a release from the county encouraging anyone in the county interested in submitting applications that they better do it pretty quick, and we can be supportive of that in that direction. And that's what Mr. Borgoff did in Phase 1 and was unsuccessful. So part of the reason he was unsuccessful is that he was late, or we were late in supporting that. So we need to get off the out of the station pretty quick because they have allocated a certain amount of money for Phase 2 as we speak.
Thank you. Councillor Gatward?
Yeah, and I failed to mention, but last October when I was in Onondaga frequently, the residents there also, that when they brought natural gas down to the reserve, they thought maybe they were going to get it too, and they stopped at the boundary. So they would love to see that extended, but they would have to work on it themselves collectively then, is what I'm hearing. Thank you.
So we've got a mover and a seconder. Any other comments before we call the vote? Councillor Coleman wants to speak to it.
Well, just to confirm what's already been said, Mr. Mayor, is that I think all rural Brant County would like to benefit from natural gas. And it's just not Scarlet, Onondaga, or whatever. I'm getting calls constantly from McVeigh Road. So it's everywhere in the county, and we need to get on this sooner than later. Thank you.
Good. Okay, seeing no other comments, all those in favor? Directing staff, thank you. Okay, Councillor Gatward, number 9.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, last year we passed a motion about looking into the fragmite problem in the county, and this letter is speaking to fragmites again on county property, and it's creeping into the condominium corporation village in St. George. And my question is, who did we refer this to? Which staff person is the lead on this project?
Michael?
Thank you. Your worship, through you is my recollection that we brought a decision package forward in the 2020 budget for this. It was not approved, and it was referred to the 2021 budget process. So right now we have no one on this. We have neither staff nor resources to deal with fragmites in the county at this point.
Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there was no money allocated in the budget. However, the resolution said that it be referred to staff for further investigation, and I thought internally they may take an inventory of, or the patrol superintendents when they're out traveling our roads, so that we know how much is in the county and whether it's a huge problem or a small problem. I've seen lots of it out in Ward 5 and some in Ward 1, but so I'm hearing that we haven't allocated anyone, which is a disappointment, because if we don't do something, it's going to cost a lot of money to fix this problem. And I guess I could maybe speak to it at Public Works, since a lot of this is on our road allowances. Thank you.
It has become a big problem, and it is all over the county, and I think maybe Public Works is where you should speak to it, because that's where the resources are, that maybe if you want people doing things when they're on their rounds or down the side roads, but it really is everywhere in the county, and I know exactly where this letter, where they're talking about, and it is creeping into everything. Councillor McAlpine.
I was just wondering if we can refer them to the GRCA. I believe they have some programs. It's already been deferred? Okay.
Yes, and if I
Councillor-
might, I reported on that. I checked with the GRCA and talked to staff there about this. They do work on them in areas of their own property only, but they were willing to come out to the garden clubs and speak to the public about how to get rid of it and how to treat it and so on. And I believe I passed that information on to the resident who sent the original letters.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to number 10, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, this is the minutes from the Nonprofit Housing Corporation, and on page 3 of the minutes, the very top motion under new other business, it says that the board investigate the possibility of selling or transferring the land and property to the county of Brant. The board was going to investigate. I wanted to point that out because later on in our package, there's something different. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Anyone want to speak to that? Okay, we'll leave it for it to come up on its own in the agenda. Anything in the consent items? We have to receive them, sorry. Oh, somebody to make the motion to receive? Well, they were both done by Councillor Bell. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to number 9, paramedic services. Number 8, sorry, Councillor LaFeria.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Mayor Bailey, that the Paramedic Services Committee report of December 18th, 2019 be approved, noting that there is one recommendation, a non-monetary recommendation.
Any comments or concerns, any conversation? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was surprised to see the square footage on the report. It's an important building that we're going to need, certainly. And I wondered, was there anything presented to committee to justify a 20,000 square foot building?
Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there was. There was a detailed discussion about the need with the growing population, the growing community, and also having to have it central, because it's not just for the staff, though we are hiring more paramedic staff. It's also hoping to house the trucks, the paramedic services equipment, and to also help with the health and safety of the folks there. The current space, I was at it the other day, I popped in, it is definitely inadequate to our needs, and will only grow more so over the next little bit.
Yeah. And thank you. I read the report, and it said each ambulance needs 500 square feet. And so if we had 10 ambulances stored at this new headquarters building, that would be 5,000 square feet for those 10 ambulances. And then we have 9 staff, and we could have more in the future. And I thought that would maybe take a maximum of 2,000 square feet for office space, and perhaps a board or a training room is another number of square feet. So I couldn't come up with 20,000 no matter how I cut it. The reason I questioned it is because it's larger than our new detachment building. And far more people work there. Mind you, they don't store the police cars inside, only some. And I couldn't find a proposed drawing of why they needed 20,000. So is that negotiable if they don't need 20,000 square feet?
Yeah, we discussed that as well, because we also need some road allowances that we were looking at. We need a central location. There's a lot there. I mean, we're only at the looking stage. There were 1 or 2 spots that we had looked at and we've already lost, unfortunately, because of the timing. So, yeah, it could be up to if you wanted to make an amendment, or if we want us to go back to paramedic services with that, but I think they understand that they're looking for the best deal that actually makes the most sense in terms of the actual need. Now, I'm not a paramedic, I'm not an expert in office design, neither are you, but I think I'm gonna believe the paramedic services folks and staff that they are telling us what they need and doing so in an honest manner.
And if I might, Mr. Mayor, we had talked about previously having a satellite ambulance / fire building in the remaining acreage at the corner of Bethel and Rest Acres Road. And a building this size, I don't think, would fit with the fire. I could be wrong. Has that been investigated?
Not since I've been on paramedic services committee, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Councillor Wheat?
I support this recommendation that's before us.
Thank you. Councillor Bell? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as the satellite one where the OPP station is, my understanding on that, it was always so we could house one ambulance and one truck. So we're not talking a building to house all of the ambulances. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, folks that were here, it was to house one ambulance and one truck
A satellite.
for
And
one of each vehicle, not all of them.
And it could be more than one ambulance, like the other satellite offices hold 2. So it could have 2. There's probably enough room for 2 ambulances, and maybe even more than one fire truck. But there's not enough room to put this building. We'd have to have a new piece of property somewhere.
And that if I may, Mr. Mayor, that location wouldn't work for what we're talking about here either.
Oh, okay, because when I read it, they wanted somewhere near the 403.
Right,
I
but,
immediately thought of that, yeah.
right, but it's also incorporating the city as well. It's not just the county, right? So the most central location for the whole
Right.
map would be where they're looking at further on in the city. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, that's through you.
That's okay.
Yeah. And thank you. And they didn't want to expand the current site on Henry Street,
Through
even
you-
though it's privately owned?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we actually can at this time. That was looked into. Now, again, two points to bring up through you, Mr. Mayor. One is that any costs that come from a building like this are significantly cost shared by the province. So that's one thing to look at. And then the other is that we're just waiting for, this is a recommendation to get a report back. This isn't a recommendation to sign, seal, deliver a lease within a month or a cycle. So again, I think a lot of the details that you're asking for will become available as the report becomes available to first paramedic services, which you're welcome to attend, and also then to this committee or council.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. And I do believe we did do our homework on this. And even our fire station here in Paris, as big and beautiful as it is, the uniforms and the equipment of all the different firemen are hanging in the open next to the trucks. And in an ideal world, they would have their own closets and they'd have their own space so that they wouldn't be out in the elements of the trucks getting the fumes on them and all kinds of things that can do damage to the plastics on the uniforms and the equipment. So I think when you're talking square footage, I think you're talking washrooms and change rooms and all kinds of things that they need. So it's not as simple as pacing out some trucks and giving it some swing room. It needs all the things that they need to do their job properly without being impeded. And even our new fire halls are going to be done. And when you sit down and do the calculations, they wouldn't make sense to you, but it's all space that they need to do their job properly. So,
Can I make one more comment?
Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One thing that was also discussed is because of the nature of the significant cost sharing with the province, that if we were to lease land for this or lease a building for this from the city could then utilize the profit of that to then increase their share, I guess, I would say, their funds towards the paramedic services, which will help us grow. As that happens, we then split it after 1 year with the province as well. So there could be a means of which we see very little municipal money going to a very nice functional center, unlike some of the other centers we have, which are not cost shared in the same way, and we can't rent from our municipal partner.
Good
Yes, and
discussion.
if I
Councillor
might,
Gatward?
one last thing. I realize I realize that. I read the report, and I do support the ambulance service. It's a critical service in our county, and I was just concerned about the 20,000 square feet, but I have toured Henry Street, and it was awfully crowded, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. B, Community Services, please.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Pierce.
Through you, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman, that the Community Service Committee report of January 13th be approved, noting there are 2 recommendations.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councillor. Corporate Development, Councillor Miller.
And Mr. Mayor, I will pull item 6 for a separate vote. So I will move that the Corporate Development Committee report of January 13th, 2020 be approved, and that would apply to items 1 to 5.
Any conversation on 1 to 5? All those in favor? Opposed? Speak to number 6, please, Councillor Miller.
Yes, I will. Again, I won't support it in light of a letter from the chair that we received this evening. Item 7B1 from Mr. Soroka. I've talked to 2 other members of the committee. They're not in support of this. I would support this motion if it came from the committee. As it stands now, I won't support it. So that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I will be supporting this, and actually for the same or similar reason. I did my homework on this one. We also have a letter today from somebody else on the committee saying that they support Councillor House's recommendation, initial recommendation. I've also spoken to or received correspondence from 3 other either recently resigned or current members who have all said in principle they support a different working format similar to Andrea's letter in here. And then on top of that, we have Councillor House, who sits on the committee, who supports it, who can't be here today because of a other work commitment, and Councillor Bell, who I understand supports the motion as a former member of the committee as well. So I'm doing the math. I see 2 to 3 folks on the committee who are not supportive of the proposed change, but I also see 4 current or recent members that are. And I think that it's a good debate to have, but we have to decide tonight, and I will err on the side of supporting.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, for clarification, if I could, from Councillor Miller, so just so I want to make sure I heard what you said there. So what you're saying is, if this exact same request came from the committee, you would support it?
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's confusing to me, number 1. Number 2, if we talk about what we're doing here, if we look at what's happening, the same thing we did with the Parks and Recreation ad hoc committees, we're doing the same thing with working groups there. We had a presentation here tonight, and they talked about, what do they use? They use working groups. So it's definitely something that's out there. It works. And I truly feel that, again, we got a letter here in support tonight. Yes, there was one letter that didn't support it. But again, I think it's going to be the same thing, just in a different format, to better utilize the skills of those people on that committee.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting Councillor Howe's original recommendation. I was on the Economic Development Advisory Committee in the last term of council. I went back in my notes, and in March and May of 2018, we, under the support of Alison, our general manager, had a consultant work with the then BDAC because it was not working as it might do. It was agreed at that point that we would move to a new structure, which would have quarterly meetings, but which would be focused on specific work tasks. And the 4 we had at that time were the Economic Development Strategy, Salute to Brant, Employment Land Strategy, and Concierge Service. I actually seconded the motion, which was carried by the then committee. I'm incredibly surprised that the minute the last term of council ended, somehow or other, all of that got forgotten and the clock was put back to 12 o'clock and everything started as it was 4 years before that. So I think what Steve has proposed makes eminent sense, and the last Economic Development Advisory Committee also thought it made great sense.
Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't support the recommendation. I had my say at our CDC committee meeting. I think everyone knows how I feel about this, and I think workshops and working groups are fine. They're great, but this wasn't done properly, in my opinion, and so I support having our committee, whether they only met every other month, and then they also assisted with these workshops that staff want to have on certain projects or whatever. But I'd like a recorded vote too, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wheat?
I will second Member Gatward's motion, because I was going to request the same thing, so I'll second.
Is there any other conversation? So to be clear, we're voting on Councillor House's recommendation? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Good conversation. Public Works, Councillor Gatward, you can stay up there.
Yes, it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Miller. Oops. Turn on my mic. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Miller, that the Public Works report of January 14th be approved. And there's two items, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any conversation or questions for Councillor Gatward regarding Public Works? Councillor Chambers.
Just a comment that the chairman can carry back to the committee and staff. The month of January and actually December have been a very kind of an unusually mild winter thus far. And one of the things that you see traveling out through the concession roads is the gravel roads are very hard to maintain in such conditions. And there have been some complaints put forward to me by some of the residents, but I will say that a couple of them did respond in kind after the roads division addressed some of the problems. But hopefully a little bit of patience out there in the gravel roads and a little bit of extra diligence by the Public Works staff, we can keep our residents happy. But it's been an unusually hard year for gravel roads.
Thank you. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd like to get just a clarification on number 2. I believe it's encompassing that, but I just want to make sure, because the way it's worded there, it says on Grand River Street between Mechanic and William. So to me, that would suggest that that is just the if you want to call it the main street there. I just want to ensure that it also encompasses the intersection at Grand River Street and William, because that is a huge safety issues at that is not a fun intersection at all. I assume that it is, but just the way this is worded, to me it's saying between. So I just want to make sure that that intersection is included.
Councillor Gatward, can you clarify that for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, the intersections are included. That's what generated this motion in the first place.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor LaFerriere.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to comment on the first recommendation here regarding municipal hazardous and special waste collection. This is interesting to see here, and I'm really happy about it. We'd spoken with some of our staff about this some time ago. Myself and Councillor Chambers, and I'll get into the joint animal control piece later, when discussing afterwards other things we may want to look at, this came up casually in conversation with the 2 Brantford councillors. I've spoken to about 6 Brantford councillors about the idea of partnering in this way, and they're very supportive as well. And it's great to see our staff moving on this and looking at ways that we can either lower or maintain costs, but increase service and increase the number of spots where people can can dump these things so that they're safely handled, and also so that people aren't having to travel way out of their way to do so. I think it's a good environmental story and a good potential partnership story.
Good, thank you. Call the vote. Oh,
Oh,
Councillor
Mr.
Gatward?
Yes,
Yeah.
I just wanted to respond to Councillor Chambers. Yes, it's been a tough winter so far for gravel roads, and I've had complaints about the mud on everyone's cars, but I hope that the roads that you reported those to Public Works so they could go out and tend to them promptly. And certainly, since they don't have to plow snow, they can be out doing other things, and thank you for that.
Any other questions to Councillor Gatward regarding Public Works? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Planning, Councillor Wheat.
Moved by myself, second by Councilor Ferrier. I move the committee report of January 14th be approved or in your report.
Councillor Miller.
Mr. Chair, through to the Chair Planning, can we remove item 3?
Number 3 is being pulled. Any other concerns? We'll vote on everything but number 3 first. All those in favor? And then we're going to talk about number 3, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any issues with the new protocol per se, but what I would like to hear is what becomes of those telecommunications planning applications that have entered the system prior to us approving the protocol. In other words, they've done what they're supposed to do under the old system, and then I've learned that they're kind of on hold until we approve the new system, or the new protocol. I'm not sure if that's fair, but I would like to ask the general manager if I could on that one.
Thank you.
Through you, the mayor, to Councillor Miller, very good question. We have 2 applications that are pending in terms of towers. They're both by the same applicant, Spectra Site. One is in the Canesville area at 15 Worthington Drive, and one is in the Burford Township area for Atonia Road. Both have agreed that the pause is appropriate, and they will be coming to council under the new protocol, meeting the new timelines, the signs, holding open houses that are all inclusive, the larger circulation area, and you should see them before you in probably March or April.
Supplemental then, they wouldn't have to pay another application fee, I would hope not.
No, they would not.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Councillor Wheat regarding number 3? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Wheat. Number 9, staff reports. A, Councillor Ferrier.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. 9A, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wheat, that the Shared Animal Control and Pound Services update, should I read it or just say as
I
read?
think you should read it just because it's been in the news a lot, and I want us to be clear as to what you're recommending.
Okay. That the Corporation of the City of Brantford and the Corporation of the County of Brant continue to explore a service client model. County of Brant may be a customer of the City of Brantford's Animal Control and Pound Services program. That staff from the City of Brantford and the County of Brant be authorized to explore and negotiate a possible solution based on the preferred model as identified above. That staff report back to their respective councils with the outcome of these investigations and negotiations, and that the Joint Animal Control and Pound Services Program Task Force be disbanded, having completed its mandate.
Is everyone clear what Councillor LaFerriere is recommending? Yeah, no conversation? Councillor Miller?
Did you get any ideas to the timeline when we might see something back?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, initially we had, but part of the reason that this is happening in this way, where we're kind of ending in a question mark, is because they've reopened some of their community discussions about their pound and the services and the SPCA and the rest of it. And that's honestly their business, and once they decide what they decide, they can come back to us with that. We have had really good conversations with our staff, Greg specifically, about where this could go and what it could look like, and we've made it very clear that if it's at or under the cost we pay now, we're likely to want to do it. If it's a little over, but it has enhanced service, that might be an option as well. But we aren't likely to accept anything out of that vein. The timing, it will depend. However, we're very lucky. Our current service provider, we have up to, I think, for the next 2 years, and we can leave after 3 months' notice at any time. Or if he or that organization becomes unable to fulfill its service level, that's another reason why we can switch if need be. But we're not bound to by the resolution as worded.
You stated that financial part very diplomatically, better than I could have, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Coleman. You're okay? Yeah. You ready to vote? All those in favor? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Number B is a recommendation by, or a resolution by Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Pierce, that 9B COU 2003 Community Grants Evaluation Process. The Council approves option 2 Community Grants Committee to complete the scoring ahead of the meeting to process and approve the community grants application to then be forwarded to Council for final approval.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one. When I was looking at the community grant allocation criteria page, which is 5 of 7 of the report, there was one item that got a high score because they hadn't applied for a grant before. And I thought to myself, does that mean that all the new people that haven't applied before are going to score higher than some of the consistent grant applications that we've been supporting for a number of years? And somehow I didn't know that or think that that was fair. I don't know what anyone else thinks, but
Are you asking Councillor McAlpine to reply or just making a note of that?
well, it's the one right above benefit to the community. It says,
Right.
has grants been from the county in the past? And if they've never applied in the past, they score higher than others. And if the ratings are based on the highest scores, that's a negative for people who have had grants in the past. And I'm not sure that shouldn't be changed. I don't know if you want to comment or
I would like to comment, if that's okay with Councillor McAlpine. I think the recommendation here is just to do the grants in a different way, and using a bit of the model of the Community Foundation. I'd like to take you back to page 154, which is maybe something that's not right. And I know that this is just, as I said, to bring it on the floor as an option to the way we did it last year and the way grants have been treated before. It got kind of Barnum and Bailey, kind of circus-like, and almost became like an auction sale at one point. And I think the fact that we're exploring this number B is a good thing. But the way it looks now in the very bottom of 154, it looks like the bottom three, the applications with the bottom 3 points are out, and that's not the way it should be. It should be the way everyone who qualifies for a grant needs to be in that pot of money. So if we want to give away $300,000, if every applicant complies and is part of the grant process, they can't lose. They have to come away with something. So if they score low and they've asked for $2,000, they might only get $500. But you can't take the bottom 2 and just throw them out. That's not democratic, and it's not part of the process. So I believe that once you qualify for a grant, you need to be divvied up in the fractional, so that at the end of the day, we give away exactly what we say we're going to give away. and we don't give away $260,000 more than what we started with just because we get caught up in the moment. Councillor Laferriere.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you and to you. I think that the last line in that page, though, I think does speak to that in that there's still committee input. And I'll just read it for everyone's edification. The committee would not be bound by the scores and could, as it see fits, amend the result of the evaluation process. Now, to me, that fits into that. If that's what we decide as a group to do, we can then do that at that committee. Or we may have reasons as to not. The flexibility is in there if we happen to know something. If we know, for example, that one of the applicants doesn't want to actually receive the grant anymore for some reason, they folded or whatever it might be. It allows us to have that little stopgap. So I think everybody's correct in this one, and I think there's a way to do it that way if we so choose, without having to make an amendment.
That's right. But all of that's done in discussion. But once you've qualified, you have a stack of applicants here now that have qualified. So that has to be the stack that gets divvied up into the amount of money you want to give away. You've already disqualified everyone that didn't have everything in order. So the way it reads here, that's not the way it reads here. The way it reads here is the bottom three are disqualified or thrown out. And that's never the way it's supposed to be. But all this recommendation is, I think, is to bring it forward as to a new process of dealing with grants. Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, and that's why I read it too as well, Mr. Mayor, and I'm glad Mark had mentioned there needs to be flexibility, and there's flexibility built in this. And we've had situations where people have asked for $5,000 and we've given them $1,000. That's flexibility, and a rigid scoring system where there's cut out that I don't think is what this is. There's still enough flexibility with conversation with the group that we can be flexible. What I do like about it is that there are criteria, and each application is vetted through a criteria process, which I think is good. But then again, there's still, there might be the outlier that might be a separate set of criteria that, as long as there's flexibility, I can go with that. What I'm thinking is that this is kind of what this will generate into is kind of a option 1.5, where it's kind of like we used to do, but is a little bit better, but not so rigid that we can't discuss it as a group. So that's why I think I can support this resolution.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and along with, I agree with Councillor Chambers, I'm willing to support that for this year. I think we need to do something. You're right, it was a Barnum and Bailey circus, but it sure brought the best out in everybody. And it was an educational evening for 3 or 4 hours. But, you know, I think there is going to be passion in this, and it really does bother me, that line under the cons, that not debated individually by the committee members in a public meeting. And I think that's the line that bothers me the most, and I think that there has got to be flexibility in this whole thing, or else it doesn't work as a democratic system.
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm in favour of option 3. I think our staff will do a great job of narrowing it down to a short list of decisions that we as a council can make. And we can argue at the edges, and I think that's where we can add most value. 90% of what we would give would be understood to be given by the staff that work this process through, because it is a very solid process. So it's only on the edges we need to work. So I don't think it makes sense for us as councillors to spend all that time working through every application when there needs to be some discretion applied, probably to 10 out of 100.
Okay, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think this is definitely a huge step in the right direction. There's still parts of it that I would like to see tightened up, and one of the biggest ones that I'm talking about is financial statements. That's something that, you know, that since I've been on council, it's one of those, it was right in there that you have to have it, right in there that you have to have it, right in there that you have to have it. And yet, there's many of them that were approved and given without it. So you know, and I think that's where the discretion comes into here. That's fine, but I think that, you know, again, this is a huge first step and we're heading in the right direction. But I think there's a few of these things on here where, to me, it's not a matter of, you know, low, medium, high. There's some of them that you either have it or you don't proceed any farther. But maybe that's phase 2 of this. I am in support of this, though.
Councillor Chambers?
With your permission, could I just make one more comment? And it goes along with what Councillor Pierce is saying. Some organizations are very sophisticated in what they do and how they apply, and some are not. Some are the neighborhood association of the greater Harley area or something to that effect, and they don't have a lot of expertise to make fanciful applications. So I'm expecting that there's going to be work by staff required to assist some organizations in putting forth an application that can address some of the criteria that they may not understand or may not normally do. So some are very sophisticated, some are not. We're going to have to make sure that the ones that aren't are on equal footing as the ones that are in terms of the application.
That's right. Councillor Wheat?
Well, first of all, let me start by criticizing Councillor Coleman. I never thought it was a Barnum and Bailey circus. There were some applications before that I didn't have a clue who they were, but 2 or 3 people around the table would inform me who they were. And believe it or not, I tried to listen to them. But this council decided to send this back to staff, and staff has done their report. They've brought it forward, and I'm going to support option 2 because that's what the recommendation is.
Any other comments? I have one more, just, I know that any foundation that I've ever sat on, and I've sat on a few of them, there is a courtesy piece to it too, that you don't, if one of the criteria is that you want the grants to go local, and there's no addresses beside the board members, instead of saying, we don't know where you live, we don't know your name, you didn't qualify, I would hope that staff would call those people and say, we really want to know that our grants stay local. Hopefully you live in Burford or Paris or St. George or something. I mean, if everyone's address is Milton, we have a problem, because no matter, even if the event is here or the grant is to be utilized here, if everyone's from Milton or if everyone's from Tobermory, it's just not local. You can't, there's no way you can squeeze that back to local. So I would hope that there would be a piece of compassion built into the way that staff directs things that aren't complete. Instead of making them wait till next year, give them a call, say, you know what, we need a new cover letter, we need a new this, we need a new that, and fax it. That's why we still have fax. It can be done in 20 minutes. So, this is our first year, so there are going to be hiccups. So as long as we go into it knowing that we're not trying to power trip, we're just trying to do it right, I think we'll be good. And I think number 2 is the right way of going, and I think if staff, that's what staff has recommended, then we should call the vote now. So all those in favor of number 2? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Let me just get here. Information reports. Are there any? No. Communications? We have the water source protection support, the actions to address the over-application of winter maintenance chemicals to protect sources of municipal drinking water. There's no resolution, just a resolution to receive as information.
Oh, no.
Oh, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is a recommendation with this report. It's found on page 176 of our package, and the recommendations are listed there and on page 177, and they're looking for council's support to, I'm asking for municipal support of the report's recommended actions, and they want us to forward a copy of any resolution to Alona Feldman. And I would imagine they would take it further, but I don't think we over-apply on our roads, but this is to, maybe this speaks to some of the contractors that lace the roads with salt, because that's what people expect is clear, dry roads. We don't, we use a variety of different treatments for our roads, but I'm sure everyone's read that recommendation. So I would move that we pass that recommendation, seeking a seconder. Because we're all concerned about the environment, and this is to help protect the environment.
We have a seconder and Councillor Bell. Any other discussion? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, if you read the report, the amount of salt in some of the wells up in Waterloo especially, they're more than the provincially mandated amount. It's terrible. They say they probably get more salt from the parking lots and whatnot, and that's usually done through private contractors. But here in the county, as we add more streets, as we add more businesses, we're going to be running into that same problem down the road. So I will support it simply because they're asking the province to look at those legal issues that cause us to throw ridiculous amounts of salt on, so people don't get sued and whatnot. So that's, like I say, I'd rather we deal with it now, because what's going on up there will eventually happen down here.
Anyone else have anything to say? Seeing
Just
Councillor Gatward?
Just a final comment. We spend a lot of money on our drinking water systems in the county, and we need to protect them. We don't want them contaminated with salt. And we have had a few issues in the past with our salt domes, but I think that's been addressed, and we're good now. But I think that if we don't become more cognizant of issues like this, our groundwater and drinking water is going to be compromised. So I hope everyone will support this.
I think you've got it, Councillor Gatward. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. B, the Ministry of the Solicitor General Regional Roundtable Sessions for Municipalities regarding Ontario Provincial Police-related regulatory changes. Is there a resolution? Receive as information. Councillor Coleman. Councillor LaFerriere. All those in favor? Receive. Thank you. Brantford Regional Real Estate Association request for a council liaison. If we want that, we need to appoint someone. Anyone interested? Do we want it? Councillor Coleman, do you think you want it? Not a bad idea. Councillor Gatward.
I think this is a, real estate companies are a private business enterprise, and this is a group of all of them. However, if they want to understand better a local government, I think we should invite their president or one of their members to attend our meetings. I don't think, if they want to know what's going on with local government, ask them to attend. Or our new meeting structure, maybe they'd be more interested in one of those meetings. But I'm not going to support appointing somebody. I don't think we should.
Councillor Ferrier.
So myself and Councillor Housen met with them, and Rose and Don, very nice folks. I'm not going to support the recommendation, just because I think it opens the floodgates a little bit to lots, like, I don't know that we should be on the Home Builders Association. I don't know if we should be on multiple boards like this that are sort of public-private interest. We already do sit on 2 chambers and a BIA, which represent these communities, including this. This group is represented on those committees as well. So it's a little bit of doubling up, but I think it might open up the floodgates. However, I would recommend, as they have done, to meet with council and councillors, to send us correspondence, to present at council whenever they see the need, and to maintain communication. I think that's appropriate.
Any other conversation? So we're going to say that this council does not support sending a liaison to the Brantford Regional Real Estate Association. Councillor Miller.
I'll move to receive.
Oh, okay. Just receive. Councillor Pierce, seconded. All those in favor? It's just received. Thank you. Number D, South Dumfries Nonprofit Housing Corporation requests for County of Brant to accept ownership of Russell Heights in St. George. How do you want to deal with this?
Well, I'll move to receive the
Councillor Wheat, seconded by Councillor Coleman. Discussion. Councillor Chambers first.
But receive, well, I made the motion to receive it, and then you make a decision on what you want to do with it. Receive it first.
Been received.
I'll make an amendment in addition to that,
Perfect. Everybody's clear? Councillor Farrier.
Just because none of that was on mic, could the clerk maybe say that out loud for the folks who are watching at home?
Sure.
Councillor Chambers' amendment is to add and that the matter be referred to staff for report. Oh, sorry. The first part is that the correspondence from the South Dumfries Nonprofit Housing Corporation be received as information.
Everybody's clear? Councillor Gatward?
Yes, and I would note that earlier when we received 7B 10, the minutes from their meeting said that the board investigate. And this letter's asking us to take over the property. And I think there's somewhere in between, there's a solution, and I'm sure staff will work it out.
Councillor Wheat?
Well, I'll respond because I'm on both boards. I'm on this council. I'm also on the South Dumfries Nonprofit Housing. I don't see a difference there. We're only investigating whether the county would be interested. And it really occurred to me, the previous budget, and I'll refer to Councillor Pierce, who will recall, the night that Harvey Wood and Sam Sheardown came here looking for money to help repair the elevator. And Councillor Pierce, if you'll recall, wondered, what if we don't give you the money? And a member of the board, Sam Sheardown, pointed out to Councillor Pierce, well, you can choose not to give us the money, but if this board disbands and walks away, you're going to inherit South Dumfries Nonprofit Housing. We ended up getting, the board, ended up getting contribution from this council to repair that elevator. But since that time, there was a mortgage on that building that's 40 years old. It's now been paid off. It's free and clear. They also own some land there that you could put an addition on that. And there's funding available, by the sounds of things, from the province for affordable housing. And the feeling of the board was that perhaps we should investigate whether the municipality, the county of Brant, would be interested in assuming this property rather than the board disbanding and walking away. Let's do it in a professional manner, comfortably, rather than resigning. Because volunteer boards would have trouble raising, and if you're looking at putting an addition on that building, you're talking 6, 7, 8, 9 million bucks. Volunteer board looking after that kind of money? I don't think so. And this might be enough, maybe this council, maybe the report will come back that you're not interested. And then it'll go back to the board to make a decision how they want to proceed. But I think this is a golden opportunity to at least investigate it. And that's all this letter is saying, investigate it.
Any other discussion? Councillor McAlpine?
Well, I was just going to agree with Councillor Wheat that it's worth investigating. They're at sort of that point in their mandate after paying off the mortgage last year. It's a question of what they want to do next. And so this is one opportunity, and there may be other opportunities they're looking at as well. So, yeah, so we appreciate the input from the county.
Anyone else have anything to say about this? Seeing none, all those in favor to receive? As amended. Thank you. Number E, Todd Gallant, Colton's Fun Farm, request for refund of temporary zoning fee. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will move this, seeking a seconder, then I'll ask to speak to it.
I'll second it.
Councillor Wheat. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This family's been going through an exhausting time in the last few years with the loss of a child. And I believe the other child has had some health issues too. They had a barn fire last year. I believe their timeline is up for, they were on a temporary rezoning fee. And I think our staff has contacted them about going on a making a full application and whatnot, and the gentleman has called me and talked about it. I said the proper way would be to write a letter to the county and ask for a request to hold us off until they get their ducks in order and whatnot, and hoping for some relief for the county for this time, being a good charitable event, it is.
Any other conversation or comments? All those in favor? Are you in, Councillor Miller?
I think we're receiving, but I think Councillor Coleman is asking that we grant $1,300. And I wasn't aware that that was the motion.
It's not 1,300.
No, it's not.
Or, yeah, actually, I don't even know how much it is. I don't think that's, I think we should have some more information on the amount rather than.
Pam's going to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor to Council. Planning staff did reach out to the Colton Farm family, and they're indeed asking for an extension of their zoning bylaw temporary use, which would be $900, and it would provide them an extension of 3 years.
Thank you. Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I think part of this should be, we also, refer them to budget next year for potential donation as well.
Should we do that separately? I think the way, Councillor Chambers?
I think I understand what's going on here. They have to apply for a temporary zoning fee, which has a fee attached to it, and they're asking that the fee be essentially waived. Right. And the way we do that is to refund it. And they still have to go through the temporary zoning application, and this does not preclude any decision on that, but it does allow them to make the application and have the funding be refunded.
Clear now? All those in favor? Thank you. Did you want to say something else?
Well, I think when it goes back, that we should just suggest them to apply for a grant at the 2021 budget as well.
Okay. Thank you. Questions? Resolutions? Other business? Ontario Good Roads Association Conference is coming up. If anyone wants any ministers spoken to, any delegations to go in front of ministers, please let me know sooner than later. Who else is going to? Yeah, Councillor Pierce, Councillor Chambers maybe. Okay, that's great. Is there anything else before we go in camera?
This is our last opportunity if we're going to put in a request. So if there's anybody who wants on any matters at the Ogre delegation, we'll need to do that tonight.
Does anyone see any need? We spoke to ministers last week. Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Was there not, we tried to get, I'm just trying to recall the minister we tried to meet with and were denied?
Clark? I'm having breakfast with him on Friday.
I'll leave it at that.
I think that's who we couldn't see before. Councillor Miller, do you have?
Yeah, this is unfortunate, because I know we talked about it at CDC about putting one in, but, and I thought, well, we can bring it up at council at the end of the month, and here we are at the end of the month, and drawing a blank.
It's getting close, yeah. Well, if there's anything that comes to mind, let Heather know as soon as possible, just so that we can try our best to.
Yeah, 31st is the deadline, so if it's not in by then, we're not getting any.
Move to go in camera?
Thank you. Motion, we have a motion to go in camera. Councillor Ferrier, second. Oh, wait a minute, Councillor. All those in favor? We're in camera. Thank you.
1 through 9 be approved.
All those in favor?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wheat, that the bylaws number 1 through 9 be approved for second reading.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions, any of them? Seeing none, all those in favor? Third reading, please, Councillor Kaufman.
Third reading, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Reek, that bylaws number 1 through 9 be approved.
All those in favor? Thank you, Councillor Kaufman.